Namaste, everyone. Welcome back to day two of the conference on CAA, a lifeline for religiously persecuted minorities. My name is Nikunj Trivedi, and I'm the president of the Coalition of Hindus of North America. As we saw yesterday, we had a esteemed panel, two panels actually, that were talking about the situation of minorities in in the Indian subcontinent, particularly in Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Afghanistan, and also what the Indian government has done as far as the law of CAA is concerned. But at the same time, what are the dire consequences of state-sanctioned discrimination, as well as policies such as blasphemy laws, as well as conversion attempts, and the treatment and atrocities against Hindu, Sikh, and Christian women. We also heard from activists who are working on the ground in India to help these refugees and to see how humanitarian efforts can really change the game, and our voices, collective voices, can make an impact. So yesterday we had a lot of conversations around human rights abuses. We heard testimonials from people who were survivors of these types of abuses. Some people who have immigrated to the US, others are still in India. So today we're going to be focusing on why CAA, what is the need for CAA, what are the technical issues behind it, demystifying, busting the myths, and we have a very esteemed panel today. Before I introduce the panel, I just wanted to share that the reason why we are having this campaign is to bring about awareness of what this humanitarian law is and why it's necessary, and also bust the propaganda around what has been shown as a anti-Muslim, anti-Dalit law, etc., like that. So today's objective is to bust those myths and also talk to students. We have a second panel of students who will be talking about the experience that they have had in high schools and colleges around this type of propaganda and the impact of this on their day-to-day lives. So before we get started, we have a fantastic video which we were trying to release yesterday, but we had some technical difficulties. So hopefully today we wouldn't experience that. The video is called, it's in partnership with Defilion. Looks like we're still having some technical difficulties. We're going to try again one last time. If not, we're going to go back into the panel and try again a little later. Please bear with me.
Pakistan is ranked one of the most dangerous countries for women and girls. Girls are suffering of sexual, physical, and mental abuses.
Toss of life, the tremors of heart, the strings of breath, I helplessly call to see your life forever unblemished and your innocence saved. What can I do? Is there somewhere we can stay? Where can we hide and make it all go away? All I ever wanted was to keep you safe. All I ever wanted was to keep you safe. If I could look into your eyes and say everything will be okay, and where your home is saving from the worst, may I secure that earth. Why should it be you to bear all the cost? If you had no blame, if you had no fault, for beasts entertained, they'll snatch you away from me. What can I do? Is there somewhere we can stay? Where can we hide and make it all go away? All I ever wanted was to keep you safe. All I ever wanted was to keep you safe. If I could look into your eyes and say everything will be okay, and where your home is saving from the worst, may I secure that earth. May I secure that earth.
The Human Rights Council must ask Pakistan how it is right to abduct these girls, force them to marry, and convert them to Islam.
May I secure that earth. This death of only release from the monsters and the beasts. Will we ever be set free and escape this agony? If we could make it to that place, a home in haven, you'll be safe. If I could look into your eyes and say everything will be okay, and where your home is saving from the worst, may I secure that earth. May I secure that earth.
The former governor of Sindh, Justice Siddiqui, ignored all these facts and said, when Hazrat Ali was converted to Islam at a young age, why can't Hindu girls?
So thank you all. Hopefully this was quite a moving video that shows the situation of Hindu, Sikh, and Christian girls in Pakistan. So we're going to move right into the panel, the next one. And it's my pleasure to invite Shubhui Khanji and Priyanka Devji. Namaste, welcome.
Namaste, thanks for having me.
Yes, absolutely.
Namaste.
Namaste. Shubhui Khanji is a Supreme Court lawyer, writer, and activist. And really excited to have her join this. Heard a lot about you, have been reading many things that you have written and following, at least since the time of CAA, have been following your writings as well. And Priyanka ji, she's a deputy editor at TV9 and an anchor. And one of the first videos that I actually looked about and tried to find out information about CAA was done by Priyanka ji, and that video had gone pretty viral. And I'm also very happy to hear that you have a U.S. background as well, having been raised in the U.S. and then moved to India, so you can understand kind of the situation that the U.S. Hindus and Canadian Hindus are in when it comes to some of this false propaganda and just understanding and confusion around these laws. So today we're going to aim to bust some myths. We're going to talk about some of the intricacies around this law, and just have a good conversation. So I want it to be a casual conversation, but at the same time, let's focus on certain types of particularities. So Priyanka, maybe if you want to, your audio is on mute. If you want to just maybe start yourself, what is CAA in your words? What is like the idea behind the CAA?
That's a loaded question. That's a good first question. Okay, so I think, well, if you looked at my video, the CAA is basically the citizenship. It was a CAB before, Citizenship Amendment Bill. Then, of course, it was passed by both houses. So it became the Citizenship Amendment Act. And it is basically to help those that are religiously persecuted in India's religiously persecuted minorities, I should say, in bordering countries. So there's been a lot of confusion about it. It's led to, as you guys know, riots in India. I think a little bit of commotion in the US as well. That's become pretty significant. But there's been a lot of confusion about it because people have linked it with things like the Assam Accord that have happened in the past. Things like the NRC, NPC came in at the same time. So I think there was massive, massive confusion about it. And of course, there was a narrative that kind of carried the wrong story. And when I say wrong, misrepresented and unobjectable facts. So I'll leave it to that. And then maybe you can ask me some specifics so that we can break it down.
Absolutely. And so a great point. You mentioned about the bordering countries and stuff. There's always people say, well, why only these three countries?
So the bordering countries are specifically Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, right? And religiously persecuted minorities. Now, I think one of the main questions that you'll probably ask both of us is why is it anti-Muslim, or why is it considered anti-Muslim?
Exactly.
Yeah, so Subui, feel free to jump in whenever you want to jump in. But first of all, I think there's a lot of confusion about this Muslim element to it. Now, the CAA, if you actually take it in hand, which I'm surprised a lot of people just didn't do. I interviewed law students over here, went on the street and talked to students, and they just had not even pulled up the act. When you pull up the act on Google, the entire thing is there. It's just about 3 pages long, not even 3 pages single-sided. So not that difficult to read. Now, religiously persecuted minorities in neighboring countries of Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, those are regarded as Muslim countries, right? So if you're a religious minority, you're anything but a Muslim, right? So that is where this anti-Muslim sort of misinformation is coming in. But it's absolutely false. So this is why it deals with the bordering countries. And also we've had a lot of issues in the past, like, for example, Bangladesh with the Assam Accord in the past. There have been a lot of problems with immigration and illegal immigration deportation as well. So this is not very different than any other sort of, I think in the US, it's every single country. I'm just trying to run a list of countries in my head. They all have a very similar thing in their constitution about illegal deportation and illegal immigration, right? So this is really nothing different to that.
Correct.
One thing that I could maybe recommend is maybe the name could have been changed. Maybe that's causing a bit of confusion. But if you actually read the act, it's nothing more than what the US law says about illegal deportation and illegal immigration.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that the Lautenberg-Specter Amendment, which is a famous amendment in the US, had actually specifically selected, I would say, the Jewish minority, and then eventually Iranian religious minorities also, when there was an amendment happened for that particular Lautenberg-Specter Amendment. So a lot of times people get confused that different countries have different laws, and it's very, very normal. So I consider this as an inclusive law that is really trying to help those that are facing extinction. and severe persecution. And we saw in the video on our website, kona.org/CAA, you will see a lot of information that is illustrating this information. So I'm glad you brought that out, because it's not necessary, different countries have these laws all the time. So it's nothing out of the ordinary. So, maybe we'll come to Subuiji. Subuiji, what are your thoughts? People have spun this as an anti-Muslim, anti-Dalit law, and which kind of boggles my mind. So perhaps you can share your thoughts on that.
Sure. Thank you so much, Nikunji. The video which I just saw, I think that is so relevant in today's time. And, I literally had tears in my eyes, because you cannot imagine the plight of those people. It is easy for us to, arrange these conferences. It is easy for us, for me to, stand or sit on a dais or deliver a speech on the subject. But, the pain these people go through, it is very important for everybody to understand, from each and every country of the world. So there are questions like, what is CAA? I can understand that is a technical question, because many confusions have been created. Some people are misunderstood about it, and some people are maliciously and deliberately creating confusions. But I would definitely come to the legal aspects of it, but just give me a few moments, because I would like to cover the entire concept behind it. When I hear questions like, what is the need of CAA? When I hear questions like, is it anti-Muslim? Or what about human rights? Is it human right violations of Muslims? These questions amaze me, Nikunji. And I'm sure you would agree with me, because as an Indian Muslim, I live with so much dignity and with so much pride in my country. And I would tell you why these questions amaze me. See, everybody, like all of us know that the partition of country, our country partition of Bharat happened on the basis of religion. Why it happened and how it happened is a different theory altogether. That concept of Ghazwa-e-Hind and making India Islamic State, that is a different subject altogether. But after the partition, minorities from both the countries were still migrating. Minorities from India were migrating to Pakistan, and minorities from Pakistan were migrating to India. So to protect their rights, there was a Nehru-Liaquat Pact. And Nehru ji was the Prime Minister of India at that time, and Liaquat ji was the leader of Pakistan. So there was a Nehru-Liaquat Pact which said that, okay, both the countries will make certain protective laws for the minorities. And in case, because India was a secular state and Pakistan was an Islamic state, so it was decided that if Pakistan would fail, if an Islamic state would fail to protect the rights of those minorities, India would pitch in, and India would always welcome those people with open arms. So this is nothing which has to do with the present government. This subject has been, cropped up since ages. Like we have been seeing that minorities were persecuted. So there are reasons why I would like to tell you that it is nothing against Muslims can ever happen in India. Like, India is a secular state, one. Then part 3 of our constitution speaks about fundamental rights, Article 12 to Article 35. And specifically Article 25 to 30 are specifically for minorities, religious, cultural, and linguistic. Since partition till today, at the time of partition, Muslims were 3 crores in India. Right now, they are 30 crores. So there is not even a question of persecution of or any human right violation of, even legal right violation of Muslims in India. There are lakhs and lakhs of mosques and madrasas in India. And all those madrasas and mosques, they are not even under the government administrative control. However, most of the temples are under the government control. And there are Muslim institutions who receive donations even internationally, and even the donations are not taxable. There are so many facilities, aid, support, policies that too government sponsored, which Muslims get in India. Then there's a specific minority ministry in India. And despite being secular, all the Muslim personal laws are still running, parallel judiciary, parallel education system, everything is going on in India. And all the premier positions like President, Vice President, Chief Justice of India, Home Minister, Education Minister, etc. have been proudly held by Muslims in India. On the contrary, let me give you a quick picture of Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Afghanistan. All 3 countries are Islamic state. They have Sharia law. Hindus' customs, practices, marriages, etc. are invalid constitutionally. Imagine. Your existence is invalid in their country constitutionally. So there is nobody to even listen to their plight. In Pakistan, from 22%, I think approx 2% Hindus are left. In Bangladesh, from 23% to 7%. In Afghanistan, forget about percentage. You can count them in numbers. So where are those Hindus? They are either killed or all of them have been converted. And this has been confirmed by United Nations Human Rights Commission report. This is not just my opinion. This has been confirmed. And how many temples have been broken in these countries, and how many NGOs, institutions, or foreign funding these people are getting to protect their rights. Nobody is there to even listen to them. So whose human rights are being violated where? This I wanted to clear, and maybe like Priyanka ji would like to jump in and take it further. Then I would probably tell why CA was necessary and what are the technicalities of CA, because these people were persecuted so much, not just legally but morally, ethically, socially, financially, psychologically, that to get rid of that persecution, these some of those people migrated to India through valid route. Of course, they have valid passports. Of course, they travel to India through valid and legal route. But they are still living in ghettos. They are still living in slums. They do not have citizenship right. They neither have citizenship right, nor do they have any citizenship. They neither have citizenship of India, nor do they have any citizenship rights in India. And I would also like to tell you, these people are just approx 34,000 in numbers. So what is such a hue and cry about this thing, that if we are giving this thing on the basis of human rights to just 34,000 people, what is the hue and cry about? I do not understand. So I would come to the technicalities later. Let Priyanka ji add on if she has, to refine what I said, what I already said.
No, that was really, really good. And then just to add on to what you said, I was reporting and I met quite a few of the refugees actually that have come back under the Citizenship Amendment Act. And, I think there was a very famous, I'm not sure if it reached the US, but certainly in India, there was one baby that was named Nagrikta, which is citizen, right? So, or citizenship. So, and I think PM Modi had also recognized that baby, right? Because she was a daughter of a refugee.
Yes.
But, all these, so I met the parents of that baby actually. And, what they were saying, we asked them, where were they from? They were from Pakistan. And they said that, they really they had no dignified life over there. Now that they are back in India, it is the first time that they are experiencing a dignified life, dignified rights and things like that. So I think that, as Subui was saying, it was 34 to 35K people that this act was meant to help. And I think one of the other things that Subui may want to explain were the detention centers and things. I know, Nikunj, you and I spoke about that a little bit before, actually, right? But these detention centers were also part of this deliberate narrative to spread misinformation and fake information about the CAA. So, Subui, if you want to start out on that in terms of technicalities, and then I can add on.
And I can tell you one thing. Sure. One thing I would talk about that, as far as detention centers is concerned, is really interesting, because what is happening in the U.S., there are certain organizations that are drawing a parallel between the Jewish Nazi detention centers, like the in the Holocaust, and the CAA detention, which is bizarre and very dangerous, because it's completely falsified. And I was shocked to see that actually people have officially said that the CAA is our Holocaust. Whose Holocaust is this? Right? So it's a very offensive statement, and it's a completely bigoted statement to say something like that. So I just wanted to share that that's what has happened in the US. So Buiji, go ahead, please.
I think I saw an Al documentary, and there was a guy, randomly and that was made to show, I think they had either play acted, and that came out as fake news because somebody called it out on social media. That's the magic of social media, I guess. But the documentary was basically a man putting, a very poor rural man kind of putting in nails trying to build this detention center, which Al Jazeera was trying to pass off as a CAA detention center for Muslims. And that was completely not true. So, Subui, I give it to you.
Sure. This is actually a frequently asked question when it comes to, CAA or NRC and, things like that. But it's a very interesting question, and people must know. See, we Indians are very emotional. We people, we never want to hurt anyone, or to violate anybody's human rights. That is why these anti-national or anti-Bharat forces try to emotionally incite us. This thing has been just created, this narrative of detention center. Let me tell you, the concept of detention center is not new in India. They have been in India since 1955 only, after the partition, because when the formal boundary was decided, people used to, infiltrators used to enter into the country. So uh, let me give an example. For example, if you catch someone who's violating Indian Passports Act, or someone who's violating Indian Foreigners Act, obviously he's not a rapist, he's not a murderer, so you're not going to keep that person in Tihar jail or some jail of India. So you need to have some place to keep those people for some time before they are deported back to their country. So detention center is, if you just rename it, we can rename it as transition center. Those people are caught, and we need to keep them for some time in detention center. So that is everything which I want to say about detention center. But one another thing I want to say, which is very important, that there is a huge contrast between Germany and India. We never believed in racial or religious supremacy of one over the other. One point. Indian national ethos never talk about killing people, or that we are superior, you are inferior, or something like that. We believe in Atma, Paramatma are same. We believe in Vedant, which says Ahem Brahmasmi, yani main hi Brahm hu, Tattvamasi, tum bhi wahi ho. So Indian ethos never believed in differentiation or categorizing, people and putting them in boxes. We believe that even soul and the universal consciousness are the one and the same thing. Uh, it is well said, I think, by Swami Vivekananda only. Nikunji, you have his picture at the background. He once said that India, I specifically noted this statement because I really liked it. Swami Vivekananda once said that India is a melting pot for different civilizations. But today, many acidic substances, like, this I am saying, this was not said by Swami Vivekananda ji. Many acidic substances like jihadis, separatists, terrorists, Naxals, communists, etc., they have poured into this pot, and they are, even melting the pot itself. So, we have all the right to identify the acidic substance. If we are identifying the infiltrators, there is a difference between infiltrators and refugees. There are difference between people who want our help, and there is a difference between people who are just coming and living in India in the garb of being a citizen and trying to eat away our country and the soul of our country. So private right to private defense is a human as well as a legal right. So I think NRC and CAA both were very important for India right now, and I'm really proud of the present government that they had the guts to at least take the initiative and stand in front of all the anti-national forces and just say it proudly that we will have it, we will apply it, and you do whatever you want to do. So that is
No,
what I would like to add
absolutely.
about detention center.
No, very good. And speaking of that, so let's build up on that theme, because speaking of detention center, there's a fear that's being created that, this law is going to is eventually going to exclude all the Muslims of India, right? There was statements made by certain U.S. candidates, presidential candidates, that, all the Muslims of India are under trouble, in jeopardy. This law will, jeopardize their citizenship. So there's a lot of, again, misinformation, and many students were concerned about this because naturally, we all have friends who are Muslims and stuff like that. And we don't want to be in a situation where we're saying, hey, we are going to eventually, or India is going to ban all the 200 million Muslims there are. That's a pretty ridiculous nonsense. So I'd like maybe Priyanka ji, you can start with that. Maybe will Muslims be excluded in this CAA, the new laws? Does it impact Indian Muslims or Indian citizens who are Muslims?
No, it does not impact Indian Muslims at all. There's nothing religious about the Citizenship Amendment Act. The only thing that is religious is, as Subuhi said before, the bordering countries are Muslim states, right? And they are officially regarded as Muslim states. So that means if you're Muslim, you are not a minority of that state. And all the more, you are not a persecuted minority of that state. So that is the only religious aspect of the Citizenship Amendment Bill. And then, as I was saying, for detention centers, I went ahead and looked up that detention center for Al Jazeera, and I made a couple of videos, kind of busting those misrepresentations. So we actually found out that by and large, the detention centers that you did see on the news and in mainstream media, like Al Jazeera, BBC, the Wall Street Journal, a bunch of different papers, a bunch of different online portals, the detention centers that you saw were actually ironically created by the earlier Congress regime, by and large, and this was according to the 1985 Assam Accord. Now, Congress and urban Naxals, I believe, created this narrative, and it's on record because PM Modi has said this, that Congress and urban Naxals are trying to create this narrative and are lying about detention centers for Muslims. So, to answer that question, I'll just... I think I heard my own echo. But
Sorry.
to answer the question about detention centers, if they were built with such pomp and at such a fast pace at the time, they were showing that these detention centers are coming up and people are constructing them. Well, what's happened to them now? What suddenly happened? I mean, PM Modi is still in power. Who's in the detention centers? Where did they go? So that just shows you the power of a fake narrative. And, all of a sudden, those same people that were touting these detention centers, they're not talking about them anymore.
Yeah, exactly. It's really interesting because, I think all of you had mentioned that India has moved on from the CAA story, but in America and in Canada and stuff, we're still seeing this. We're seeing cities, 7 or 8 cities have passed anti-CAA resolutions. There's still, and we'll see this in the next panel about students, there are in high school and middle school, as we were talking yesterday, there are students who have been told that India is building these types of ghettos and India is building this type of like exclusionary act in the name of civil rights. This is a wrong type of a thing. So maybe Subuiji,
where are they? Can you locate one of them? Can you take us to one of them? Can we see them?
Yes,
right?
yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
They exist in oblivion, some kind of alternate universe, unfortunately. But Subuiji, coming back to you, so there was a discussion that happened around Supreme Court. So there was a couple of articles that I read that you had mentioned about certain articles in the Constitution. They had mentioned that Supreme Court can actually throw out this bill or act now. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I would like to answer it with a counter question. Why haven't they done it till now? See, whenever Supreme Court feels that a law has to be scrapped down or it is unconstitutional, generally they just look at 3 things. First, what was the intention of making that law? Citizenship Amendment Act was to give citizenship to, people who were being persecuted. So it was brought in for human rights. It has nothing to do with any specific religion. Religion was not the only criteria. Human right violation was very important criteria. So intention was definitely good, noble, and very much required at that time. So on this ground, obviously, they are not going to, scrap the law. Second thing Supreme Court looks at is whether the proper due course of law has been followed or not. The law has been, as Priyanka ji rightly said, the law has been passed by both the houses of parliament. So the law has not been passed illegally. Thirdly, last but not the least, Supreme Court also looks like, does it violate any article of the Constitution? People who are opposing CAA, I ask them, you just name one single article of the Indian Constitution which has been violated by Citizenship Amendment Act. They are not able to give even a single article that this article has been violated. What they say is, let me give you an example. They say the preamble of India talks about India being a secular state. So you cannot bring a law specifically on the basis of religion. This is the only ground which they're using again and again. But it is falling flat because it is India's Supreme Court's judgment only that although preamble is a part of the Constitution, preamble is non-justiciable. You cannot challenge a law on the basis of saying that it violates the preamble. If you have to challenge a law, you have to show that it violates some article of the Constitution. And even if some article of the Constitution contravenes with the preamble, then the article supersedes. Even this has been said by the Supreme Court. So that way is also their reason falls flat. Then they say it is violation of Article 15. Article 15 of Indian Constitution says that no discrimination only on the basis of caste, creed, religion, place of birth, and gender. And they forget that there is a very important word, only. No discrimination only on the basis of either of these things. So only is absolutely not applicable here. Religious minorities is just one aspect. Human right violation is another aspect. It was decided at the time of partition, that is third aspect. Nehru Liaquat Pact was there, that is fourth aspect. It has been, this question has arisen so many times because those people needed our attention. That is another aspect. So only on the basis of these falls flat. So I'm 100% sure the Supreme Court is not going to do anything against Citizenship Amendment Act. It is very much legal and very much need of the hour, if I would
Absolutely. Say. And so keeping with that, I think there is a discussion now, like after CAA, it's NRC and NPR, right? So I want to, Priyanka, you had done a video on this thing, like, CAA, NRC, NPR. And the narrative that I've been hearing is that, CAA, okay, fine, CAA may be okay. But when you combine it with NRC and NPR, all dooms, like a doomsday scenario is coming, So can you maybe share a little bit about what NRC and NPR really are?
Yeah, and I mean, just to answer, where is that doomsday? I mean, it's life as it is, right? Right now, where's the doomsday? I'm still online. I'm still very comfortable, as are all my friends in India and across the country. So there's no doomsday over here. But basically, the NPR is the National Population Register, right? And it is a register of usual residents of the country. That's basically what it is. Now, when we look at the NRC, that's a citizen register, which names every citizen of the country, right? Or the name of every citizen in India is recorded. So, I mean, if you just think of it, 1.3 billion people, that's going to take a long time. So the rules of it have not come out yet because, of course, the entire world was hit with COVID right after. So the rules have actually not come out. But NPR and NRC, I mean, if you think about it, what goes on in my mind, and as you said before, I do have a background. I grew up in Chicago. So the first thing when I looked up what NPR, NRC actually was, number one, it's basically like a census. It's nothing different, right? It's basically a register of the country, the name of every person who is a citizen of the country. So it's a gigantic directory of sorts, I guess you can say. But it's nothing different than a census. And a census is carried out in multiple countries. It's not just the USA. It's not just in India, but it's in many countries, in most countries. And that is important for demographics of a country and to make policies, right? So there's nothing really doomsday about it. I mean, when you look at it, when has the US Census caused a scenario of any sort of doomsday whatsoever? So you just have to think about it like that. I think that what happened here was they kind of put it together, and because the rules of the NPR and the NRC were not disclosed, right? All of the rules and how it was going to be carried out, it was not mentioned at all in the news. So I think that this sort of deliberate narrative of the other side, this counter narrative, took advantage of the fact that it wasn't really clear what it was, and they kind of tied it, and that's basically what happened. But if you think about it and if you look it up, I mean, simple Google search, NRC, NPR, you'll be like, oh, okay, it's not that scary, which it's not.
And a really interesting thing is that I believe that in 2015, it was the Supreme Court that actually mandated that the NRC be taken, sort of like implemented in that sense, right? So it was coming from the Supreme Court itself, right? So isn't it like the government is just carrying out whatever the Supreme Court had mandated?
Exactly. And let's keep in mind also, in addition to all of the articles and parts of the Constitution that Subuhi mentioned, we also have the Citizenship Act of 1955, right? So that still stands no matter what, even with an NCR and I keep mixing up the act. I'm terrible with acronyms, by the way, the NRC and the NPR. But the Citizenship Act basically states that there are 5 ways to become an Indian citizen, right? And that's by birth, descent, registration, naturalization, or incorporation of territory, right? So these 5 ways still stand. So how is it that an NPR and an NRC can exclude somebody based on religion somehow? There's no possible way. And by the way, it's also Indian law that nobody can be excluded for being a follower of any religion. So in that sense, whatever narrative that anybody is trying to push otherwise on the NPR and the NRC, It's absolutely false because you still have these laws that check it.
Correct. And what's interesting is, so people say, oh, only one community will have to show like their passports or like prove it. But from what I understand, it doesn't matter whether you're Hindu, Buddhist, Jain, Muslim, Christian, you have to show your citizenship identity, that you are a citizen of this country. So it's not excluding one particular religion or one particular community. It's going to apply to everybody. Is that correct, Subhuji?
Would you please repeat the question?
Yeah. So as Priyanka ji had mentioned earlier, that it's applicable for every Indian, every citizen basically. So it's regardless of religion, right? So the idea here is that a lot of times people think, oh, it's going to exclude Muslims only. But from what I understand, it applies to all citizens from all different religious backgrounds. Is that correct? Is that how the law is, the NRC and the NPR?
Absolutely, Nikunji. See, citizenship laws are in every country. India is not the first country which is having citizenship law. Like Priyanka ji rightly mentioned that, America also has censors. It's just that India has always been so loving and motherly towards people. Like we believe in Atithi Devo Bhava. Like we treat even the guests like gods. So that is why we have we are actually being taken for granted. If you ask me, in a layman's language, citizenship law has to be in every country. It is there in every country. And actually India also had Citizenship Act 1955. It's just that it will be followed properly now, because many anti-national forces have started eating the country, and we really need to know who all are the citizens of India. And there is a reason why citizenship law should be there. Am I audible to you, Nikunji? Because am I audible? Okay, because I can't hear you.
I'm on mute. That's okay. You can continue.
Okay, sure. See, I would like to tell you why the classification of citizenship is important. See, there are certain rights, there are certain privileges of a country which are given only to a citizen. Like if I talk about India, and if I talk about Indian Constitution, Article 15, Article 16, Article 19, Article 29, and Article 30. And let me not forget right to vote, the legal right. All these things are special privileges of an Indian citizen. Let me give you an example. If a guest comes to your home, of course you will give him good food. You will give that person comfort, respect, everything, human rights, whatever they deserve, you would give them. But you would not give them decision making powers of your house. You would not give them to start deciding what color of wall you would have. You would not give them access to your bedroom. There has to be a decorum. There has to be a line between a resident of the house or a citizen of the house or just a guest. So we just want to talk about that classification, which is very important. And Priyanka ji rightly differentiated between NPR and NRC. I would just like to add on that National Population Register is just a register of the entire population. Even non-residents, non-citizens would be covered in that. It is just a register of residents, citizens or non-citizens. The government should know who all are living where. If someone would commit some kind of an offense or kidnap someone, or some kind of a terror attack happens, at least you should have some kind of a documentation and the list of people that who all were living where. That is registration of population. NCR is just a register of citizens. So it will apply to all the people, irrespective of their caste, creed, religion, whatever faith they follow. It is nothing against Muslim, has nothing to do just with Muslims. It is just a normal citizenship law which applies to all the countries of this world. So India is no exception.
Absolutely. And that's a really good point, because there's where the confusion comes in. Now, let's talk about, let's say a Muslim person or anybody, doesn't matter what religion they are, wants to emigrate to India. Can they still do it today? Can they just normally emigrate to India, Priyanka ji? What about, maybe you start and then Subhuji, you can talk about it. Just a normal person. Let's say I'm coming from Afghanistan, or I'm a regular Muslim coming from Indonesia, Afghanistan, or even from the US, or a Christian person. Can they still come in?
I mean, come in to live, come in to visit, come in
to... Can they emigrate to India? Can they emigrate to India today?
You'll have to... CAA... Yeah, of course they can. I mean, CAA is not applicable to them. But you do have to follow the rules of what proper migration rules. So if you come under that, that's fine. If you have a visa, like if you're coming in from the US, you have to have a 10-year visa, and of course you can come in. And that's if you're American Muslim coming into India, you can do that with an American passport. There's nothing that can stop you. Citizenship Amendment Act for sure is not going to stop you. And now I think before I go to that, and the answer to your question is no. But I think one of the very confusing things is, I don't know if maybe this was the case in the USA, but one of the very confusing things of the NRC, and I think you alluded to it a little bit, Nikunj, in your question, was what details need to be provided, right? And that's applicable here as well.
Yes.
Now, for the NRC, right, as Subui was saying, the NRC is basically a citizen register, right? And that's really important for the government to know for just national security interests, for just general purposes. This is in every government, right? Now, what is needed in the NRC, what was actually elaborated by the government, was that you need to provide your place of birth and your date of birth, right? So now when you talk about religion, now if you think of if to prove your place of birth in the US, right? The first thing I would do, if I got into grad school, for example, I had to prove my identification, right? I'm not going to pull out my US passport. The first thing I would pull out is my driving license, right? Because that proves my, right? So I think that was a source of confusion over here. And that was also taken in the wrong way, because details of a person's birth and place of birth were enough. Now, how to prove it? There's a bunch of different documents that can prove it, right? You don't need to show what religion you are, which is what the narrative was trying to say, that if you're, Muslim, then they're just going to give you a very hard time. That's impossible, because you can show your insurance papers, which doesn't have any religion of yours. You can show your driving license, which certainly doesn't state what religion you are. It may state your height and your weight, but it will not state your religion, right? You can show your Aadhaar card in India, right? You can show your address. You can show your, bank documents if they have your date and place of birth. There are many different, even a school certificate over here will have your name and place and date of birth. So I think that, as I can't say it enough, the narrative was just taken to the extreme, and for no reason at all, because that was the only rule specified so far and still specified so far. They've not elaborated how they're going to do it. And I'm quite honestly very, very curious as to how they are going to do it, because kind of taking a register of 1.3 billion people is going to be a task, and it's going to take many, many years to do it. So,
yeah, absolutely. And the reason I bring this up, and I'll bring in some U.S. politics here. A few years ago, there was a discussion about the Trump administration bringing in a law about sort of certain countries not having people from certain countries emigrate to the U.S. right? And there was a huge issue happening here, and they called it the Muslim ban, right? And they took that particular U.S. kind of politics issue and superimposed that onto the India, and they called it, this is India's Muslim ban. So essentially, the CAA combined with NRC and NPR, et cetera, is going to be the India's Muslim ban, which again, for me, that was a shocker, because there's no such thing like that. There is no list of countries in India that says, oh, well, all these people from these countries are banned. Even with Pakistan and Bangladesh, et cetera, people are not banned from there. There's a different process for them to emigrate to India and stuff like that. So Buiji, what are your thoughts on that? Like, is it, is it dangerous to call this a Muslim ban? Because it's not really a Muslim ban. There are certain, you talked about this earlier, but perhaps your thoughts on this whole idea of taking like a US political issue and kind of superimposing it in India. Does it apply to India in that sense?
See, very good question, Nikunji. See, this kind of confusion is created by two kinds of people. One, the people who are behind the agenda of Islamic State, and this is not just happening to India. These people are, running this agenda throughout the world. People are being killed in Syria, people are killed in Europe, people are being killed in America, in Pakistan, China, India, wherever. So people who are trying to run this agenda of Islamic State, they have created a theory that Islam is in danger. So whenever something is done for the favor of humanity, whenever something is done to open the eyes of people, they will always try to create a fake narrative that this is being done against Muslims. I, as an Indian Muslim, in the beginning of the video only, it was very important for me to tell you that how India is a country for Muslims. India has not just tolerated but celebrated Muslims, and not just Muslims, almost all the cultures of, and the civilization of this world. As I said, that it is a melting pot of so many cultures, multicultural, multilinguistic, and such a beautiful country we have. Likewise, in America, I was talking about two kinds of people who create this confusion. One was the people who have this agenda of making the whole world an Islamic state. There is another force which is behind creating these fake narrative, which is the political parties. There are political parties who are in power or who remain in power by dividing people. Either they divide in black and white, or they divide in majority and minority. They just create a narrative that, okay, you are in danger, and if you want to be protected, you just vote for us, we will protect you. They have no intention of actually protecting you. When you talk about civil rights movements in America, we have been listening about civil rights for since ages. I have like grown up, like I'm almost 30 plus. I have been listening about civil rights for since ages, but still those people need their rights to be protected. Why? In India, we have listened minorities are in danger, but still minorities need to be protected. Why? Because the people who run this agenda, and they do the politics of dividing and rule, they do not want you to be uplifted. They do not want your pain to go away. They are like those, if I say in desi bhasha, they are like those makhi on zakhm. Like, they just try to find out your problem areas. And abusive people, they are like parasites. They will just stick on to your already painful area, and they will just feed on to your pain. They will use it for their political gain. So I would like to tell people that please do not get blackmailed, do not get emotionally incited by them, do not let them guide your rationality, your thinking capability, your decision making power, and do not let them divide you and put you in boxes. Whenever there is any kind of a confusion which is created, just go through it, read, and always read good people, always listen to good people, nationalist people, people who actually believe in human rights, not just who try to run an agenda of human rights. So I would like to say this on this question.
Right, excellent point. So let's talk about, we talked a lot about CAA and all these things. I want to switch a little bit on the Delhi riots. So there's been a lot of issues. Again, propaganda. There was a book that came out that analyzed the whole Delhi riots issue. So maybe Priyanka ji, you can start talking about what happened during the Delhi riots. Let's talk from a general perspective first, for the viewers to understand kind of where the situation was, and then we can talk about some of the specifics around it.
So the CAA led to massive anti-CAA protests, right? And the Delhi riots was kind of something that sprung out of those anti-CAA protests getting violent, right? So you had what shocked me the most, and what really made me question the intention of the CAA riots and the anti-CAA riots. Most of the ones that got violent, and I would think all of the ones that got violent, were the anti-CAA riots. But what really shocked me, they were making headways and front pages in all of the newspapers here, all of the online platforms. There'd be a riot springing up in Bombay, they'd be in Delhi as well. What really shocked me and what made me question their intention was I saw a lady in a riot holding up a poster on 370, Article 370, which is Kashmir. So I was like, what is she doing there? Did she miss the point of the riot? Then, they went through all these celebrities, started endorsing anti-CAA as well over here. But then there were, I think that narrative kind of fell flat because they interviewed one of them, one celebrity at an anti-CAA rally, questioned him about, CAA. It was Farhan Akhtar. And he was just at a loss of words. I think that went completely viral. If not nationally, I hope it went viral internationally. But he was like, I believe his specific words to that were, I think, if so many people are gathered around here, there must be something wrong with it. So the man had no clue why the hell he was at a CAA protest. So you kind of knew they were just there to either get paid or to endorse something, or they had no clue what it actually was. Now, when you have a bunch of angry protesters not knowing exactly what it will, I went to the crowds and interviewed a bunch of people, all young people there. So I interviewed people my own age, little younger, students. What don't you like about the CAA? What is wrong with the CAA? What they just couldn't answer. They were like, I don't know. I think, one guy thought that it was a anti sort of transgender rally. One thought it was an anti-gay rally. So they just had no clue why they were there. So this became violent, and it broke out in the Delhi riots. Now there was quite a bit of violence. There were schools attacked. Different parts of Delhi were attacked because of this. You had Shaheen Bagh, that was there for almost, I think, a little over a month. But what was really intriguing, and if you go back, whoever's watching this program, if you go back and look at the images from it, you'll see all of these, which is what made me really question what is the origin of these riots? Why are these people so angry? And you'll see a bunch of mixed posters, abrogation 370, article 370 abrogation, Kashmir abrogation. You'll see nothing to actually do with the CAA, which is ironic. So
it's just a bunch of lot of confused people in that crowd, for sure.
It was a bunch of confused people. Shaheen Bagh, there were paid protesters over there. That is a known fact on the ground. Plus confused people, plus angry people who are anti-national. So right there, that's not a good combination, right? You have all the makings of violence, which is why the riots broke out. And the coverage of the riots is a whole different topic, but I think Subbu, you can talk about it, and I think Nikunj, you'll probably ask me about that a little later.
Yeah, so exactly. So now, Subbuji, on your point, I think you had just a few days ago, or maybe a couple weeks ago, I don't remember, you had actually be on a newscast to talk about how there was groups like the Popular Front of India, for example, which is a very Islamist group, had paid people, I think it was like 20 or 30 crore rupees, in bank accounts and stuff like that, to show up at these protests and to cause a lot of issues. So can you elaborate on that?
Yes, absolutely. Nikunji, whenever there is an agenda which runs, there is always, money is involved in that, because people don't come out of their houses and gather in massive numbers just for nothing. Some people would actually know the agenda of Islamic State, but most of them are ignorant. Like in India, I see that there are three kinds of people: nationalists, like Arashtriye, like people who are just ignorant, they don't know what's happening, and Deshdrohi, like anti-nationals. So Rashtriye people, like nationalists, know what is happening, and Deshdrohi anti-nationals know what is happening. But majority of the people are Arashtriye, like they are just confused. They're not connected to their motherland. They are not connected to their language, their culture, their history, and they're just clueless. So this agenda is run on the basis of these Arashtriya people only. That is why these conferences are important. Like you mentioned, PFI. I would like to bust one, the practice which is followed by, Islamic State agenda wala people. I always believe that when a child is born, nobody is a born terrorist. Like when we say that the child is the form of a god, or the child is Bhagwan, बच्चा भगवान होता है, तो कोई भी माँ के पेट से आतंकवादी पैदा नहीं होता. To make a child a terrorist, they have to go through a process. So they've made different organizations. Some organizations are separatist organizations. Like they just teach you, no, you can't use colors of holy. Allah will fry you in a hot pot of oil. They just put some kind of a fear in a child's mind and just try to make them separate from others. And there are organizations which are doing this. There are Maulanas which are doing this. So, and these Maulanas, they go to almost each and every Muslim household, and Muslim kids are separated from the entire world. So there are separatist organizations, then there are extremist organizations. And once a child becomes a separatist, then it is easy to make him an extremist. Once he is made an extremist, then it is very easy to make him a terrorist. Like Al-Qaeda or Hizbul Mujahideen or ISIS or Jaish-e-Mohammed, they cannot approach me and, they cannot make Subui Khan a terrorist. They have to, let you go through a process of separatism, extremism, and terrorism, only then they can use you as a pawn to achieve their goal of Islamic State. And this process also needs funding. So there are institutions like PFI. So I think if we would understand this process, if we would understand these organizations, I would like to name few also. There are some Muslim kids who like namaz padna, roza karna. So there are institutions like Tablighi Jamaat to embrace such Muslims, and they in the garb of telling you karm kand and doing namaz and roza, they will incite those seeds of poison in your mind. Then some Muslim kids are interested towards academic, they have academic inclination, they want to read. So there are institutions like Darul Loom in India, we have Jamiatul Hind, there are academic institutions, and in the garb of educating you, they will put seeds of terror in your mind. And some people are aggressive and assertive, and they want to do real, and they want to do action. For such Muslim kids, they have organizations like Jaish-e-Mohammed, Al-Qaeda, and such terror outfits. For funding, they have PFI. Earlier, it was SIMI. SIMI is now banned in India, but PFI is running on the same ideology. So if we understand this narrative, it would not be rocket science to understand that no one is against Muslims. Subui Khan is celebrated in India. At times I become so emotional at the kind of love and support and faith I get from people. So a Muslim is never criticized or looked at with doubt in India, has never been the case in India. It's just that Ghazwa-e-Hind has become such a big threat for India, and not just for India. The Islamic State has become such a big threat for the entire world that it is time for everyone, especially for Muslims, to open their eyes. For you, it is you, like I believe, as Subui Khan, as an Indian Muslim, I call myself a Sanatani Muslim. I believe that I have dual responsibility. As a Muslim, also, it is my responsibility to tell that my Allah is the most beneficent, the most merciful. My Allah is the creator of the entire universe. Do not defame my Allah in the to fulfill your agenda, political agenda of Islamic State. And as an Indian also, it is my responsibility to stand for my country. When there is a specific anti-national force which is acting in my country and operating in my country, it becomes my responsibility to fight against it. That is why I have actually waged jihad against jihad. So that is
And that's a
there.
very
And
important
quickly,
point.
yeah.
No, go ahead, please. Go ahead.
Okay. I was saying that we were talking about CAA. You've already busted many myths about CAA. I would quickly like to bust few more. People ask that what about Muslims? Like you are giving citizenship or you're giving relief to these Hindus of these three neighboring countries, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Afghanistan. What about Muslims? If any Muslim is persecuted anywhere, or leave, forget persecution, even if a Muslim just wants citizenship of India, would the person not get the citizenship in India? So as Priyanka ji mentioned, I would also like to cover it quickly, that as per Indian citizenship law, there are 5 ways to become a citizen of India. Either by birth, if you're born in India, you're a citizen. Either by descent, if either of your parents are born in India, you would be a citizen of India. By registration, if you're not a citizen but you want to become a citizen, you just apply, like you go and apply for an Aadhaar card. Even if you go and buy a SIM card, you have to give your identity card. Don't you give? So just fill a form by registration, you can become a citizen. By naturalization, like if you are living in India from the past 11 years, you can apply to become a citizen of India. And by acquisition, like if India acquire some place and you happen to be the citizen of that place, you automatically become the citizen of India. So if any Muslim wants to become a part of India or a citizen of India, the person has all these 5 options open for them. So this is no rocket science. It is just a myth which has been created. Another myth is this, that you asked in the beginning that CAA is anti-Dalit. I would like to tell you that the 34,000 people who are getting this benefit, almost 90% of these 34,000 are Dalits. So CAA can never be anti-Dalits. At the
Yes.
time of partition, many Dalits were made, after partition, many Dalits were made to do menial jobs in Pakistan. Even today, they are, if you have to clean the toilet, if you have to do clean the gutter, you have to be from a specific faith. That kind of a government is running, an agenda is being run in that country. So this is nothing against Dalit. Another point, they say that, Modi ji, like, I'm so proud that, in my lifetime, I saw such a prime minister, and my country was lucky to get such a prime minister at this point, at this crucial point. Modi ji was very much required by the country. These anti-national forces are looking at him as a threat. Like in Uttar Pradesh, we have a very dynamic chief minister, Yogi ji. I'm a big fan of him. So many anti-national forces against Yogi ji also, because these people are afraid that, you know, nationalist people and, you know, national leaders like Modi ji has the power to, you know, to fight with all these anti-national people, and all their anti-Bharat agendas will be busted. That is why they are creating a fake narrative that this is to make Hindu Rashtra. CA is to make Hindu Rashtra. Like 135 crore population we have in India. 34,000 people will make India Hindu Rashtra. Can it happen? And then there is a cut-off date also. Like these 34,000 people are getting citizenship only if they have entered India till 31st December 2014. Had it been an agenda to make India Hindu Rashtra, it could have been for the indefinite
70
time.
years.
Why was yes? Why would it limit to a specific date only, that people who've entered till this date only they will get the benefit? And last but not the least, in NRC, like these people are supporting, like against NRC, they are saying no, NRC should not be applied. In NRC, almost 7 crore infiltrators would be, you know, identified. 7 crores. And in CA, only 34,000. So they are against these 34,000. These anti-national forces are against 34,000 and in favor of 7 crores. So imagine that, is this agenda of Hindu Rashtra or is this agenda of Islamic State? Of course, this is an agenda of Islamic State, because you are afraid that in NRC, many infiltrators, many illegal immigrants from different countries and spies, imposters would be identified. The only catch in CA and NRC, I would like to sum this up. The only catch is this, that you would have to produce your documents. So whoever is getting afraid of it, they either do not have documents or they have fake documents. That is the only fear they have. And just to save themselves from, you know, that law, to save themselves from the bright future of India, and to run their agenda of Islamic State, to run their political agenda of, you know, just ruling India. So they are just creating this fake narrative, that and nothing more than that.
No, and really interesting you bring up, and it's great. Thank you very much for summarizing that. I think it's really, really important as we kind of summarize that part of the discussion. And I think what's important for us to keep in mind is that many times people have this feeling that, you know, Muslims are anti-India, or there's anti-nationals, you know, and then there's this a narrative around how Hindus are doing this. But, you know, I can tell you, I mean, when I came to in the US, I was young, but I grew up with a lot of Muslim kids, and I can tell you, Indian Muslims are very patriotic, and most of them don't really necessarily go into this. It's a group of people who are driven by political agenda, driven by the ideology of Islamist, state type of a thing, etc. Create these headaches and create these fake narratives. And having talked to many patriotic Indian Muslims, you can see, just like yourselves, that this is completely different. And I'm glad that you brought that up and you summarized that. So let's talk about, as we're getting closer to the end of this conversation, Priyanka ji, maybe we can talk about media, right? Both of you, Priyanka ji, you actually are in media. Both of you are frequently on media occurrences and everything like that. What is the role of media? Like, what is I would say, we understand that media has spun the narrative, but shouldn't it be supporting this humanitarian law rather than creating these fake narratives? What are your thoughts on that?
So that would be in an ideal world, you know, and you mentioned media. If you go, I just went on Google right now, and I'd like to read this one sentence, right? I looked up 2020 Delhi riots, and the first thing that comes up on my Google is Wikipedia, right? And you see how pointed this narrative is, right? And you see how wrong this narrative is when you're talking about media coverage. Wikipedia says the 2020 Delhi riots, so Northeast Delhi riots, were multiple waves of bloodshed, property destruction, and rioting in Northeast Delhi beginning on the 23rd of February and caused chiefly by Hindu mobs attacking Muslims. You see how pointed that sentence is. And do you see how unfair that sentence is? Even if it's true, where are the facts supporting it? Is this journalism? Is this fair report? Is this free reporting? Is this democratic reporting? Is this representative of the fourth pillar of democracy, right? That we see both in the US and that we hope for and strive for in the US and in India. And as you said, Subui and I are both very involved in these panels, and it's honestly very frustrating at times. You had a publication during the Delhi riots, the Wall Street Journal, which is a very big publication. In fact, it came to my house when I was a kid in Chicago. I grew up reading that paper, and that was the paper, right, all the smart people used to read, right, because it was just so complicated to understand. But I looked at Delhi riots, and they had a misrepresented, they lied in the Wall Street Journal. What had happened was the brother of an officer who was killed during the riots, they had quoted him. And then that brother came out on social media and said, hey, I never said this. So you just have to think that, ma'am, what have I been reading all of these years, right? Has it been real? Have they just made something up over here? You had one other major publication, I believe it was the Indian Express, right? Now, when they say, like Wikipedia says, it was chiefly by Hindu mobs attacking Muslims. Now, to promote this narrative, they called it a pogrom. And a pogrom is a very, very powerful word, right? That basically, I mean, it's close to more violence than what a riot should be, right? It's a very different meaning. Now, in the Indian Express, they cropped an image, right? And they cropped it in a way to crop the guy's skull cap that he was. That was a Muslim skull cap that he was wearing, right? So it easily identified him as a Muslim, and he was shown throwing and pelting stones on people in a protest or people on the street. And they purposely cropped just that part out. And that also came in social media, that this is what this paper is doing. And they forwarded this narrative of Hindu mobs attacking Muslim, peaceful Muslim citizens of India.
Right.
Now, I'm not saying, I think that reporting is very incorrect, because why is this about communal politics in the first place, right? This is about Delhi riots, and citizens of India, whether they are Muslim, whether they are Hindu, whether they are Jain, whether they are atheists, they are getting hurt and they are being under attack, right? Their lives are being put in danger because of these riots in Delhi. So Delhi citizens' lives are at risk. So to answer your question, it was very frustrating to see that the focus of media was on this pogrom narrative, which was absolutely false, rather than actually looking at Delhi as a whole, right? Looking at the country as a whole, saying that, hey, these riots are actually endangering citizens' lives, endangering property. Why should it be targeted towards one community or another? It was very, very frustrating to me. And I really thank God that today we have the power of social media. That's where I have sort of chosen to go, rather than I've joined TV9. I'm part of TV9 Digital, though, because I do think that power of social media is that citizens can now come out and call it out, right? And a lot of citizens now are unafraid to do that, thanks to the Prime Minister, thanks to confidence of other voices on social media as well. You're unafraid to call out, and you're not afraid of being trolled. I mean, it's the truth. So very frustrating experience, but I mean, there has to be someone. There have to be people like Subui and I to kind of fight this narrative, and of course you, Nikunj ji. So it's as frustrating as it is a necessary effort, and I encourage whoever's watching, if you've taken the time to watch me blabber on, I think it's really important to put your voice out there, because that's what I started doing on my Twitter. I started with, I think, 300 followers who were all my alumni. Nobody else was interested in listening to me, and I forced those alumni to become my followers. So, but because I was putting out the facts and really fighting these myths with facts, right? Like, where is the proof of this? Let's get to the bottom of this. I think that's really important for citizens to do, and I think that citizen journalism is going to play a big part in Indian journalism going forward, especially on digital platforms.
Citizen journalism, I really like that. I think it's very important and very powerful. Like, the fact that we're having this conversation, at the peak of this discussion, we had about 180 people live, and then this video is making the rounds too. But the idea is social media certainly has a huge impact, and both of you have very large followings now. Thanks to social media, right?
Just one thing. I never had the confidence before, because I'm like, who's going to listen to me? Like I said, it was just my friends, and they had no interest, to be honest, in what I had to say. Very few likes and retweets. But don't feel that your voice is just very insignificant, because it is really powerful.
Yeah. So let's do this. I would like to give you guys one minute each to kind of give some advice and tips for U.S. Hindus and Canadian Hindus who are fighting this false propaganda, and it's making a real impact in their lives. And we'll see the student discussion a little bit later. What are your advice? What are your thoughts of what they should be doing, how they can fight this propaganda, and really take the narrative back, saying this is a humanitarian law that is protecting persecuted people from our community, is not some anti-anybody law in that sense. So Subhuji, maybe you start first.
Yes, Nikunji, very good question, and my favorite question in the entire discussion. See, people who are fighting for this cause, people who are speaking up for these persecuted minorities, I understand that you have to answer so many technical questions. At times, like being a lawyer, it becomes easy for me to answer the questions. For a layman, maybe it would become a little difficult to, to clear those doubts. But I really salute your emotion, your courage that you're doing it. Keep doing it. Like I am on social media, you can contact me, or if you have any questions regarding CAA, and if you're not able to find any reasons or logic to convince the other person, you can ask me the question. And you can also email me at subuhikhan7@gmail.com. I would personally answer each and every query regarding CAA specifically, because right now we are doing this conference on CAA. Keep doing it. As Priyanka ji rightly mentioned, that even one single voice matters. Never think that you do not have a huge fan following, so your voice doesn't count. You are just planting seeds, and you never know which seed will become a tree, and you never know which seed is going to do what for the country and for the humanity, maybe. So each step is important, each step counts. One message I have, Nikunji, for people who are speaking against CAA, and specifically people who are ignorant about it, who are just getting carried away with the false narrative. I'm just giving a simple test to them. you know uh, to Indian Americans, and Indians who are living in America, to Hindus who are living in America, just imagine for a second, leave aside what someone is saying, leave aside what Nikunji is saying, what Priyanka ji is saying, what I am saying. Just leave everything, close your eyes, and think for a moment. Imagine that you are being persecuted in America. God forbid, khuda na khasta, you are being persecuted in America or in any country on the basis of religion. You're being raped, murdered, slaughtered. Just imagine that pain for a moment. Who would you look up to? Which country would you look up to? Of course, you would look up to the place where you belong. You would look up to the place of your genesis, the place of your origin. These people, these persecuted minorities of Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Afghanistan, they have no place to go. There is nobody to listen to their plight. So please do not become pawns of anti-national people, of people who are against humanity. Opposing CAA, Citizenship Amendment Act, is like opposing humanity. I would like to conclude on this. Just think and introspect on this, what I just said, and I think you would get the answer, because that moral compass within, that the Paramatma who's residing within would definitely give you the right answer, and I'm 100% sure about that. Jai Hind, Vande Mataram.
Excellently summarized. Thank you so much, Subhuji. Priyanka ji, go ahead, please.
So that's a tough act to follow, Subhuji. I think you summarized it really well.
Yeah, but you have a different experience. You've grown up here, so you can empathize with the kids that are going through some of that stuff. So maybe you want to directly target that also.
Yeah,
Yes,
what I
absolutely.
was going to say is, for someone who has not lived in India, for I would say a very recent resident of India, right? I went to elementary school in Chicago. I went to high school in Chicago. I graduated from Illinois, went to Harvard, had no plans of coming to India, and then came to India in 2018, right? So for someone like me, I think that, to get introduced to these issues firsthand, of course, you read about it in the US. But as I said, I too was looking at pictures of and papers like the Wall Street Journal and getting my news from there, right? So it's really difficult to decipher what the right narrative is and what the wrong narrative is, and if there is a right or wrong narrative, and then how are you going to apply that for every single thing you read? It just becomes very overwhelming. And it's hard enough to get high school kids. I remember I was a debater, and my mom used to tell me, well, how are you a debater in high school if you never read the newspaper? I mean, how does that even happen? So it's very hard to get. I can understand it, right? You don't have the time, and that kind of comes with more experience, that you read different sources of news. But what I would suggest is, the like I said before, for Shaheen Bagh, right? It really didn't even hit me that something is fishy going on. There's something really off of this narrative. Somebody new to kind of this entire world of Indian politics, right? What struck me, as I said, for Shaheen Bagh, for the CAA protests were these posters for Article 370 Kashmir and other things which had nothing to do with CAA. So that's when I started looking it up, and that's where I realized, the importance of looking things up. Don't just follow something that you've read in the news. It just takes maybe 1 or 2 extra minutes of your day, especially if you do consume news, on apps and things like that. It takes maybe 1 to 2 extra minutes of your day to kind of look and see, well, where exactly is this detention center? Where is it located? What is happening over here? Who is this person who's being quoted in the Wall Street Journal? Can I look him up on social media? Can I look him up on Twitter? Can I look him up on Facebook? Go in depth. If you have any questions, if you see something kind of not making sense, I would say take the time to really go and look it up, because that will really help you. It's like I said, CAA was a 3-page document. I wouldn't even say 3 pages, Nikunj. It was 2.5 pages. So if I'm not mistaken, it was like really, really short, right?
Absolutely.
Yes.
It's a really short thing to read. And once I read it, I was like, oh, I mean, it took me a minute to read the entire thing. And I'm like, there's really, like, what is this chaos all about? So try to do that. And you have the magic of Google. This kind of gives away my age, but unlike high school students today, we had to look things up in encyclopedias. And I remember the Encyclopedia Britannica in the library and things like that. And the internet came, a little later. Even the use of the internet, as much as we use it today, came a lot later for us. So you guys have the power of Google. Just do a Google search on these things. CAA was available right there and then. It took me a minute to read it. And then I was clear on what my opinion is. So what I would say is, before you make an opinion on something and decide to, go with one narrative or the other, make sure you do a fact check for yourself, right? If someone asks me this question, am I able to answer it for them? Is the CAA anti-Muslim, right? Well, why is it anti-Muslim? If you can answer that, and if you're logical, and if you're objective in your answer, fine. I'll debate you on it, right? And then we can agree to disagree. But if you can't answer it, then you know that you're just kind of following one narrative or the other. So I advise you not to do that, because it's really, really important. Because this narrative is costing, not just damage to property, but damage to lives and innocent lives as well. So
Absolutely.
It's as much of a responsibility for the government. It's as much, I say, citizens' responsibility to know what's really going on and to question.
Yes, and you've put it very well. I think that's what I encourage also, and people who want to read more about the actual act and stuff like that, they can go to kona.org/CAA. We've created a resource page with all the videos, with some of the news coverage, and the actual document that was published by the government of India in the Gazette, right? So people can actually read it and say, this is what the law really is. So it's 2.5 pages, and it's very easy to just see what the law is. So I'm glad both of you, Subhuji and Priyanka-ji, you joined this panel today. Very, very enlightening discussion. And I learned a lot, certainly. This is not the last discussion that we're going to be having. There's a lot more I'm looking forward to working with both of you on, and how we can try to impact the narrative through social media, through other types of media, like the TV9 channel and other places that you guys are connected to. Because together we can make a difference. And it's really about Satyameva Jayate, right? The truth shall prevail. Ultimately, the truth shall prevail. But the truth needs our help today. It's not truth shall prevail. Truth needs our help, and then truth shall prevail. Because if we don't do the kshatriyata, if we don't become the kshatriya, the warriors for dharma, for India, for our communities, there is no way we're going to be able to make a difference as we go forward, because there is a lot of propaganda out there, and kids who are not familiar with our way of doing things, our Hindu dharma, our values, and even about what India is as a country and as a civilization and as a concept, we're never going to be able to fight this false propaganda. So I'm really happy. I want to thank both of you for joining the panel today. I'm looking forward to working with you in the future. Namaskar.
Thank you so much. Namaste.
Yes. Namaste.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Namaste. Pleasure.
Namaste. Okay, so everyone just stay on. We are going to go right into our next panel. For that, I have the pleasure of introducing some young faces here. And I do not see, where's Amrita? Amrita, are you there?
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yes, your video is not coming, so maybe turn the video on. Great. So thank you all for joining. Let me start with some introductions real quick. This panel is going to be focusing on, hope you all saw the panel, the previous panel. There was a lot of good information available for all of you as students, as young professionals, as high schoolers, to read and understand and bust some popular propaganda out there. So in this panel, we're going to have all of you talk about some of your experiences as students and what you can share with your fellow high schoolers and your fellow college students and stuff like that. So maybe we'll do some round of introductions. Devansh, so we have a kind of a international panel here. We have Devansh from India. He's currently studying in the US, but virtually right now, but he is residing in India. We have Aman from the UK. We have Amrita from good old state of New Jersey, and Lakshmi from Canada. So thank you very much for joining all. Let's go right into our current discussion. Maybe first you want to talk about, what you guys are, as maybe 2 minutes each, where you are, what is your, how do you think about Hindu Dharma? What are your, what are some of the things that you really enjoy about Hindu Dharma? So maybe I'll start with Amrita.
Yep, thank you. My name is Amrita, and I am a senior at Rutgers University, majoring in political science. And Hindu Dharma to me is a way of living life. I personally don't say Hinduism, I say Sanatana Dharma, which means it's a way of living life. There's no fixed beginning, so it's like a way of all these practices that just came in. I've always been like a devout Hindu because I grew up watching my parents do a lot of rituals, say a lot of slokas, mantras, and do like respective traditions where they do like pujas and all that. So that meant a lot to me. Actually speaking, when I was young, I wasn't really focused into it. I would just put up a sign like this and I would just keep walking. And I never really knew the importance of these special things that my parents did every day. But as I got older, I got really curious and I'm like, why do we do this? Why do we do that? I did my own research. And of course I asked my parents, who explained it to me too. And that's when it really hit me that I've missed out a lot when I was a kid. And I felt bad because I didn't look into what these practices meant. So Hindu Dharma to me is really special because it's a way of living life. We have a rich history and culture that has been preserved, and we have a lot of history that I'm learning one by one. So it's it's pretty close to my heart because I get to learn these interesting things that I never did before.
Fantastic. Lakshmi, just kind of sharing your thoughts on that, having grown up in Canada, a slightly different experience for you. But please go ahead.
So, I'm from Brampton, Ontario, Canada, but originally from Toronto. It's really different. But ever since I was in preschool, I went to a Hindu Indian school. And over there, I did learn the importance of Hinduism. However, it was the same thing. When you're little, you just go by what you hear. And you sleep at the pujas and you walk around the temple holding your hands together, as Amrita did say. But at around elementary school, just because I'm in high school right now, I haven't experienced as much as all these university students have. I wanted to fit in a lot. So I kind of hid some of my Hindu identity away. However, whenever I tried to wear the kumkum, I was called Bloody Mary multiple times. So I stopped after a while. But after 12, I went to Chinmaya, Balvihar. Those were my communities. Now I'm a part of HSC. And my parents, they always have taught me everything I need to learn. So I've become the devout Hindu I am now.
Excellent. No, that's very important, and it's we're going to talk about this in a little bit. Maybe Devansh, you obviously have an Indian background, so it's a different experience. So maybe you want to share your thoughts about kind of how do you practice? What are some of the things that really fascinate you about Hindu Dharma?
So a bit of introduction about myself. I'm a junior majoring in computer science at Stanford University. Currently, I'm virtually taking classes from India. Now, I was born and brought up in India, but my school and social environment, not my family environment, were particularly irreligious, like pretty much all upper middle class environments of India are. And on top of that, I went to an anglicized boarding school. But it was in boarding school that I actually got face to face with my dharma, my Hindu dharma, because it was Hindu dharma and my faith in my gods and my prayers that helped me withstand all the tough moments in my life. It gave me strength, and therefore Hindu dharma has become particularly integral to my identity. And when I came over to Stanford in California, I saw a lot of mistaken narratives being floated around about the religion by people who had frankly little to no idea of what it actually is. So it's uh, it's something that I am particularly assertive about, and it's something that's really really core to me. And yeah, and I do love it very much.
Awesome. And finally, Amin,
Mhm.
sharing a few thoughts of yours.
Hi, so I am living in England and I am a electrical and computer engineering major at King's College London. I'm in my first year, and I I was kind of brought up in quite in a majority white community. My school was mainly white. I think 97% white. So I didn't have the exposure to like from other Indians. So I got quite into like Hindu Indian history at quite a young age through Amar Chitra Katha books that my parents had bought, and obviously just through Wikipedia. So that's kind of how I brought up my Indian like Hindu identity, just through history basically, because
Fantastic.
I didn't have the exposure in the religious sense to other people. So it was mainly my parents bringing me up as a Hindu, and they had kind of enforced certain principles that I still follow today. So doing puja every single day, they kind of made that a standard for me.
Excellent. And it's really, really interesting because all of you are from sort of different backgrounds, but there's yet similar challenges, whether you grew up in an area that didn't really have a lot of Indian people, or you went to a school in India, for example, or you live in a suburban area where a lot of people don't really embrace their Hindu identity or think it's kind of a backward, kind of an antique backward culture with all these like atrocities, or just kind of experiencing that firsthand, being in the US or in Canada. So, and the reason I started off that with, because it's going to be very important for our discussion, because what that does is it sets a stage to show that sometimes you have to, you either are not sure about your Hindu identity, you often shy away from it, right? And not necessarily you guys, but maybe your peers and stuff, or you try to hide your Hindu identity or hide issues that may not be very comfortable to talk about, right? While other traditions and other religions may be very comfortable talking about their traditions because they've been grown up in an environment that helps them and allows them to practice their tradition freely without being ridiculed and stuff like that. So let's talk about CAA and a few other things because that's part of the panel. And so first of all, as we were talking a few days ago and over the last few weeks, we have seen a bunch of examples of how the narrative around CAA is being spun, right? So we have seen an example from a school in North Carolina, the Texas Forensic Association, and many other different schools. There's a school in Maryland. So let's talk about some of these examples. So the example that we had talked about was how India is being portrayed. So in a high school, they talked about enlightenment, and they talked about the idea of equality and enlightenment, and then showed how India is not an enlightened state, or is not a state that is welcoming. So when you hear these narratives, what are your thoughts? What goes on in your mind? How do you feel about this? And so maybe we'll start with Lakshmi first, and then others can chime in.
So in Canada so far, we have not had anything in schools to do with CAA or Hinduism or India, but recently they did instill the Hindu Heritage Month, which is November. That's just a slight little background info. So I have not personally experienced anything regarding CAA, and only recently did I understand the actual concept of CAA. I heard from the mainstream media and the fear mongering that it was extremely Islamophobic. So I kind of sided with that for a couple of months till I got into the Kona dialogue. But to hear that it's like anti Muslims and it's pro nationalist and everything was kind of shocking, because we were so welcoming as a nation for so long. I never heard anything negative about it. So I almost felt targeted, not in a victimized way, but as part of a community. And I didn't like it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, I know that in Canada, luckily, these things are a little bit less. So I'm very happy to hear that. What's happening actually in the US is very different ballgame altogether. So maybe I'll come to Amrita for a second. And again, you don't have to experience this yourself, but imagine if you had to, right? If you were in that hot seat where somebody actually asked you point blank question that, hey, your religion is anti-Muslim, or your religion is against minorities and things like that. So Amrita, I'll come to you on that point.
Yeah, sure. So when I heard about like these anti-India narratives going on, I was really upset, because India is a nation that welcomes everyone regardless of who they are and what they identify as. It's like a melting pot full of cultures. You find everyone in India, and I feel like the diversity aspect in India is really beautiful. So even there was a protest like at Rutgers in a different campus, where they had like an incorrect agenda of the CAA, and they were protesting against it. But then
Your voice is breaking up, Amrita.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes, better. Yep.
All right.
Go ahead, please. The protest.
Oh.
You were talking about the protest.
Yep. Yeah. So there was a protest going on against the CAA at Rutgers, and in my head, I was like, wait, do they know exactly what this law is? And do they have any evidence to back up their claims? Because I feel like the people that are against the CAA, they don't know what exactly it is. They're watching the biased news that comes on either of their favorite news channels, and then they form their opinions based off that, and they argue. But the thing is, you need to research your information before you argue, like with your claim on like what you think is right. And that's what I'm really urging people to do. If you're against the CAA, please look it up and please read it. It's like a 2 to 3 page document. It's not even that long. You need to know what the law is before you argue against it, because overall, CAA is just to bring minorities from the countries that are suffering back to India based on religious persecution. So when all of this anti-Indian narrative was going on, specifically in New Jersey, I was upset, but then I told myself that they don't know what they're arguing about because they haven't done their research properly. But at the same time, I did have support too. I had people who supported me based on my views because we all had the same opinions. So it went like both ways. Like there was support and then there was backlash. But overall, I was really thankful for the support that I got too.
And I'm glad that Lakshmi, you brought up the Kona dialogues. I think it's very, very important because we hold these weekly dialogues with students and parents. And I really encourage parents to come to Kona.org and contact us, info@kona.org, if you would like to join the Kona Dialogue series on CAA and many other things. So Lakshmi, you've been part of it and you've been able to get some benefit of it. I'm glad you brought that up. Amrita, you actually mentioned about the fact that you have had that support. And I've personally seen a lot of I would say, misinformation on Instagram. A lot of students and a lot of young people nowadays, do work, significantly. They use Instagram and stuff. So when you read those things, certainly there's a real problem there. So Devansh, I'm going to come to you. As a, from coming sort of Indian background, but now studying virtually for now in the US, what are your thoughts? Like when you hear some of these narratives, sitting in India, what are your thoughts on that?
Mhm. Yeah, so the first time I encountered something anti-CAA and the current government in India was during an anti-CAA protest on my campus. Now, I got very similar feelings to Amrita's, thinking that, what are these, random protesters, some of them who I might have never even like been able to locate where India is on a map, thinking about this. I've, but, thinking more about this, I was deeply worried, and not just as a Hindu student, but also as an Indian student and Indian international student, because it all reeked of a very clever, regime change kind of a pattern that has been played out by certain elements in the United States. That you sort of brand this one particular country as a Islamophobic or whatever kind of, you just paint it with negative labels and you create a negative narrative about it in the US public, and then sort of you go ahead and attack it, because I saw what kinds of demands these protesters had regarding India. They said sanction India, sanction our top officials, uh, you know break off our US India partnership and all of those things. So I saw that there was something really deeply sinister about it, but fortunately, none of, just by a stroke of luck, nothing, came across, and we are all safe. So this was, and yeah, that's what these were my thoughts on this kind of, very sustained and very planned operation that was being run against my own country and my own faith. Yeah.
Absolutely, and I think I'm glad you brought that up, because it's coming from an Indian student perspective. I think that's really important. I mean, from a, I talked about Instagram earlier, right? But there are like TikTok videos being created. There's Instagram. There's so many things that are portraying an anti-India and a Hindu-phobic narrative. And so when you look at these stories, what do you do when you look at these stories? When you see an Instagram post that goes viral with thousands of likes and thousands of maybe creating stories and stuff like that. There are big handles that are posting this information. How do you feel? Do you feel lost? Do you feel concerned? How do you react to it?
I feel more confused and, in a sense, angry, because there's so much misinformation on social media. The issue with mainly my generation is that we get all of our news just from social media without actually reading into what infographics are talking about. There are many infographics on Instagram, on Twitter, and videos on TikTok that they just spread misinformation. Like on the CAA, there's many pages saying that Hindus are killing Muslims just out of nowhere, just unprovoked. They're just going to their houses, burning everything down. And when you read into kind of the news articles on all of these and you read the statistics, they disagree with what the infographics are saying, because they're perverting the views, they're perverting the actual stories, and making Hindus look bad, which is concerning for many Hindu students in America, the US, America, Canada, the UK, because we then get gaslighted much more, even though we're trying to present our views. The CAA, it's just for persecuted minorities. It's supposed to be inclusive. But then once you portray Hindus in a very as the enemy, it affects us both mentally and possibly physically as well.
Yeah, and that's critical, because that mental pressure, physically, obviously there are laws in place and stuff like that. So that's, obviously that's very concerning if a physical attack actually happens. But more importantly, I think there is a psychological attack that is continuing to happen. And I can tell you, I've talked to kids who are 9 years old and 10 years old, and they come home and they tell their parents that, oh, is India kicking out all the Muslims, right? Or are we Hindus against minorities and against Muslims. And parents who have no clue what these kids are talking about have to sit there and explain to these kids that it's not the case. You have to spend an hour, 2 hours explaining what is India, all these things. So I fully agree with you that the psychological pressure is significant. And what happens is, let's say, for example, today in schools, there's a concept of like bringing equality, bringing your whole self to schools, bringing your identity as you are. But the problem is, how as students, as Hindu students, right? How do you bring your whole identity into your school? Because you're not really, first of all, there's misconceptions about you. So when you walk in and you say, I'm a Hindu, there's a kind of a list of 10 disclosures that you have to go through and say, well, I'm not this, I'm not that, I'm not against any minorities, I'm not against this. And this gaslighting that you had talked about, Aman, earlier, I think that has an impact on you. So I want to piggyback on that point and maybe talk to Amrita a little bit about this whole idea of gaslighting. And how do you then, in a situation where you already have a disadvantage, right? I consider Hinduism or Hindu Dharma at a disadvantage when it comes to this particular dominant narrative. Then how do you conform? How do you try to bring out your authentic Hindu identity in the midst of this pressure? Any thoughts on your end?
So I try to encounter gaslighting by explaining history, because history does play a pivotal role in today, because history does affect everything in today's society. So I explain what's happened. So I want to give you an example. We all know about the Kashmiri Pandit genocide that has happened since the 1300s till today. So surprisingly, personal story here. I had a debate with this girl, and she told me, oh, well, it happened in the 1300s. I don't think we should kick out the other people. And I'm like, wait a second. That's not right what you said. So every time I try to bring in history, I'm trying to explain that these things happened. So technically, you can't say this never happened because it did. So whenever I face like instances where I'm gaslighted, I try to explain as much as I can, and then I let it go, because I know that I'm not lying at the end of the day. And there's no need for me to lie because I'm telling the truth.
Correct. I think sharing the history is very important. And we talked about Amar Chitra Katha and many of these, whether it's Chinmaya Mission, etc., that talk about some of the religious history and some of the things but I think it's very important that the political history of Hindus, the political history of ancient India, from the lens of the Hindus, is not talked about a lot. And I can tell you, Devansh, perhaps you can share how history books are in India. When I was growing up, certainly, I'm much older than you are, but the idea is like when I was growing up, only thing that I learned was how great the Mughals were, or how great the British were, and how civilization was brought in. It essentially starts from like the Aryan invasion theory, then goes to some Ashoka Buddhist like reforms, then comes to maybe a little bit of a Gupta Empire, then comes to like Mughals, then finally the British, and then independence India, right? There's massive gaps in there, and I feel that because of those gaps, we have a problem, because most people, Hindus, don't recognize their true rich history, which now through social media people are learning. But maybe Devansh, you want to share your experience on that?
Yes. So, I mean, one unfortunate thing is that there's been very little change in the history books ever since your time, and that's that's a pretty serious concern. It's the same thing that they do talk about prominent Hindu empires besides the Islamic sultanates and the Mughal Empire. But I always see this over glorification, a very lensed up version of the Mughals, and not a very praiseworthy like discussion of the British. But I do see them like consistently praising Akbar and certain other Islamic rulers. But the only ruler that they praise, which is not Islamic and of pre-medieval India, is Ashoka. And I see a very clear like political thing out there, because many of the ideals of the Indian Republic are based on Ashoka. So for some reason, they like glorify Ashoka, glorify the Mughals, and talk in detail about the British Empire. But they do. It's not that they don't mention all the intervening regimes, empires, and kingdoms and their culture and everything. But this hyper focus on these three kinds of rulers is something that I find particularly concerning, and it's really fortunate that we have access to social media, which helps us gain more information and understand the true glory of our great country's history.
Absolutely. I think that's a very important point you bring up. Um, let's talk about a little bit on coming back to CAA, coming back to the kind of the negative narrative out there, right? Many times, as I mentioned, we all find these things. So I want you guys to share some experiences. Like, uh, have you seen a lot of parents? Let me backtrack a little bit. A lot of parents, what happens is they're so busy pushing you through school, pushing you to go to music class, maybe do some yoga Vedic chanting classes, or don't get into trouble and stuff like that, right? And it's very much like okay, just be, don't get involved in anything, don't get into all this politics stuff. But you are facing that. You are facing those social media attacks, or you are facing those gaslighting things. So what do you guys think should be happening? Like, how does it make you feel? Like when your parents tell you to be a good boy, a good girl, and just sit there and like don't put your head down, but then you're being attacked on the other side. How do you feel? So maybe Aman, you can give us some thoughts on that. First, you start, and then I'll move to Lakshmi after.
So, so when I was much younger, around 12, I wasn't very much. I mean, no 12-year-old was really into politics, but at 12, I didn't know that much about my faith, and I wasn't always encouraged to learn about certain intricacies. So I was always asked by people, why do you worship an elephant? Do you drink cow urine? All of that. Do you worship cows? Is the cow your actual mother or something like that? So because I wasn't encouraged to learn about it from my family members. I didn't really know how to respond to these attacks, and I feel as if many Hindus that are my age who are being attacked by people on the CAA, different Indian political issues, which we're not completely connected to. We have opinions on, but some may not. If you attack someone that is not very knowledgeable on a certain issue, then they're likely to get swayed to the other side because they're being attacked and they don't know much about the issue. So sometimes my parents do still say don't get too much into politics, but because I still do get attacked by, even some close friends who have attacked me on the CAA and, gaslighted me on my stance on it. I just don't, I can't fathom how not as knowledgeable Hindus would react to these attacks. It definitely have a much greater psychological impact on them.
Yeah, absolutely. So Lakshmi, when you get attacked on these things? Yeah, go ahead, Amit. You want to add something?
Yeah, so so I have two friends. So we made a group chat on just discussing the CAA and other like the NRC and whatnot. So they basically said that the police in India are they're lighting these buses on fire. The protest is all the state's fault and all of that. The CAA is anti-Muslim, and so I tried explaining very nicely through a couple of paragraphs and actual like the PDF of the Citizenship Amendment Act. And even though I explained very, very nicely, they said that this is like the government lying to you and all of that, even though proper legal procedure, proper parliamentary procedure had been put in place, they still disagreed and said, no, this is unconstitutional. That so it comes to a certain point where you can't really argue anymore. You just have to give up because you're not going to change their opinion once they have their own agenda.
So they've bought into the propaganda and some conspiracy theory idea, basically saying, okay, India has this, suppressed like media and a conspiracy theory to get out like all these, it's basically Hindu phobia. I consider that extreme Hindu phobia, and the propaganda has really come down to that unfortunate situation. Lakshmi, your thoughts on that?
So as I said before, I have not been attacked, but I have seen so many social media posts, and on and off, I would have like friendly discussions, not as aggressive as Amin's friends probably have had with him, but a lot of them question. And I've only gotten political probably 2-3 years ago, and I still do not have a label on my political stance. However, some of my friends, a lot of them think being liberal is being basically anti-Hindu, and it's like siding with recently persecuted minorities and, for example, Muslims, which I'm not trying to go against them at all, but they think it's persecuting Muslims, and I don't know how many times I have to say it, especially on social media, like again Instagram. Every day I have to defend Hinduism, and it's not only like for CAA. A couple of days I had to defend recently for CAA, and one time it occurred for Ram Mandir. So I don't really have any personal experience with the CAA, but with my family in India and over here, it's not one night we don't discuss about CAA and for example, Nav Goswami, we watch his news almost every day because of what's going on. So
you have been basically you are forced to defend your faith, and every day you are being questioned about your identity. Sorry, I got disconnected. My apologies. So what I was saying is that you're always forced to defend Hindu Dharma, and you're always being forced to stand up. And all of these problems, CAA, Kashmir, Ram Mandir, everything is a problem within Hinduism, right, or Hindu Dharma. And that's what my concern really is, that you are being put on a spotlight. No other tradition is being put under the spotlight, and that's what really concerns me, because it's not CAA. Tomorrow it'll be something else. But these types of attacks, these types of narratives continue to happen. And like I said, before you walk in and you declare yourself a Hindu, right after you declare yourself a Hindu, you have a list of like 10, 15 disclosures that you have to go through. It's like a contract with like fine print saying, I am a Hindu, but I'm not against this. I'm not against that. I'm not like this. I'm not like that. Why do we have to explain that, right? Why do we have to go through that when other traditions and other faiths don't have to go through that? Right. So Amrita, coming to you, I mean, just piggybacking on the experiences, right? I'm sure you've had that experience. What do you think? Like, at home, do you have these conversations with your parents? Obviously we've had some of these conversations between us, but sometimes, like Lakshmi was saying, that she has conversations and she has to explain away so many things, and I'm sure you have to do the same thing with some of your friends.
Yeah, at home we do have like conversations about this almost like every day. And sometimes I'm told to like, be a good girl, don't say anything. And I'm just like, and they're always like, sometimes they're like, just don't go into like the political stuff. But I am a political science major, so I can't really like go blind when I see like all like these political issues coming in. So I have to intervene, obviously. But yeah, I do face a hard time sometimes because people do carry their own narratives, and the thing is, I can't do much about it. You're allowed to have your own opinion. You don't like India, that's totally fine by me. It's okay, you don't have to like India. But to spread propaganda by claiming that India is kicking out this one community, India's becoming a fascist, you're an extremist, is too much, because technically speaking, you're arguing on the base of your opinion, which is what I'm trying to emphasize again and again. And I am a little bit scared because, personally speaking, if I say I'm pro-India and I'm pro-Hindu, and I want to put my identity first and to uphold Hindu Dharma, I'm honestly afraid of being called a fascist. And I'm honestly afraid of being labeled as a racist or like xenophobic, whatever you call it. So that kind of fear is lingering inside among me, but at the same time, you have to be brave and face whatever obstacle comes out at you, because there's always a good ending at the end.
Wow, yeah, that's very, very important point. Like you're when you become afraid of your practicing your religion, it's like psychological persecution. That's the way I look at it. It's not physically, you're not being thrown out of the country or thrown out of anywhere. You're not being converted, but you're psychologically persecuted because you can't even say I'm a proud Hindu, right? When other religions and other traditions can actually go out and say, I'm a proud this or I'm a proud that. I stand for this, I stand for that. And you as a Hindu cannot do that. you have to basically keep doing that. Oh, this is what Hindus. You have to keep explaining. My problem is that psychological pressure that continues on you to keep explaining away is just not fair. And it's not fair as a young Hindu for you to go through that at this young age or at any age, right? We believe in, kind of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. The idea is one family, but family is equal. One person is not better than the other person in a family, right? If you cannot be, equality only comes when both sides are equal. Some are more equal than others. It doesn't happen. So I'm coming to you, Devansh. What are your thoughts? Have you had similar experiences, even in India or here?
What could you repeat the question?
Yeah. So like how Amrita
gaslighting?
mentioned, how Amrita mentioned that you are basically in this situation, right? You have she's a political science major, so she has to discuss this. But then she has to go and have a conversation with her friends, and she feels like she has to keep explaining herself and the psychological kind of persecution, or what I call.
Now, I have been fortunate not to face it to a large extent. Most of it is done by actually a lot of my high school friends on Facebook, Instagram, and other kinds of social media platforms. But the chats end then and there on the social media. So and on every platform I'm pretty unapologetic, and because I know that if I cave in on one issue, they'll make me cave in on 100 other issues. So as they say, you yield an inch, they'll demand a mile. So it's for me, it's that gaslighting or psychological attacks haven't been, fortunately, touch wood, that extensive. But whenever I've had a conversation with people questioning me about my beliefs of being a proud Hindu, a proud Indian, and all these questions come up, I'm pretty unapologetic about it and pretty assertive about what my government and what my people in India are doing. So it's basically, in my opinion, a test of your boldness, because they're not going to come out of your head. You have the freedom of speech rights in both of the countries that I'm associated with, in US and in India, and we all should remember that, and we should just be firm. I think that's the only way you can handle all of this. And obviously, then there's a wider discussion of creating a community and something like a safe space for the people who might not be that assertive or who might not know much about all of this. And for that, actually, I found your organization Kona and the related organization of Hindu Students Council to be particularly helpful.
Yeah, so that safe space is really, I'm glad you brought that up, the concept of safe space, because every community, every tradition has their own safe space where people from the community provide guidance, provide resources to their youth so that they don't get brainwashed, they don't get psychologically persecuted, manipulated, those types of things. So we're trying to create that. I'm glad you brought that up, Devansh. Let's talk about, we're kind of coming close to the end of the panel. I want to talk about, as young Hindus, right? What can parents and the broader Hindu community do to support kids like yourselves as you navigate through these choppy waters, as you navigate through the sharks of the ocean? How can we become that ship? How can we become that support, right? That protection for you? And the reason I'm asking this question is because it's very critical. As a parent myself, whose child is eventually going to go to high school and then college, I want to be there for her. I want to be there to make sure that she doesn't get into this psychological persecution. And I think, what advice do you offer? What advice, or what are some of the concerns that you have for parents? What should they be looking out for? And what are some of the things that you would advise them to consider? So I'll start with Aman, and then we'll go around.
So one thing I'd say is you can be as traditional as you want you can treat Hinduism as your own personal faith, but then you also want to look to spread awareness about your own people. So for the CAA, I think it's more of a human rights issue than it really shouldn't be a political issue, because these are people's lives that are in danger. I just say that parents should encourage their kids to get into politics, obviously within reason, so they shouldn't get too much into it and then the studies are affected. But they should have it on the side so they know kind of they can make up their own opinion at a younger age, and not then find out about everything later on and have a kind of skewed view in that sense. So But I just say don't discourage them from talking about these issues, because although they don't impact us in the West, they impact our people in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Afghanistan. So that's, I think, that's the only advice I really have.
Okay. Lakshmi?
I guess looking for resources would be good. I think so far parents are doing so well. I mean, if you're in the HSC or if you're in multiple Hindu organizations, then I think you've done pretty well. But yeah, involving your children in politics would be good. That way they can defend themselves in society, because sadly it's prevalent, and kids can't really live right now. As we heard in school, they have to do assignments based on CAA, where they should be at 12, should be playing around and, I don't know, going where they want to go. But yeah, so resources such as Chinmaya, or if you have like small organizations based off your community in a certain state of India, or HSC, those are communities kids can go back to ask questions, and even people of their own age group. That way, sometimes they don't necessarily have to go to the adults, because sometimes adults cannot be warm. Like, how do I say it? Heartwarming or warm. Yeah.
Welcoming.
Welcoming. Yeah, that's it.
No, very good, very good. I understand where you're coming from. It's we as adults have to consider like when you are talking to us, you're coming to us out of concern, and not just brush that away and say, forget it, just concentrate on your studies. Because no, you won't be able to concentrate on your study, because this is psychological bullying that you're going through. And if that has an impact on your head, forget the studies, they go out the door. So Amrita, what is your advice for parents?
Well, I have a set of advice points for the parents and the children. Now, first, for the parents, start educating your children on what Hindu Dharma is. Whatever traditions you follow, pass it down to your children. Explain it, what the significance behind it, how to perform these rituals, and how to respect the culture. Start training them from a young age, because I'm really thankful for my parents who taught my brother and I these rich traditions, and we still continue it today. And I'm really proud to say that. Spend time with your kids, keep them updated in the news, and tell them, like, make them aware of history and current world events. That really matters, because history is important for today's society. And for the kids, honestly speaking, don't shy away from like your Hindu Dharma. Just don't. I mean, there's nothing to be like ashamed about it. There's nothing to be judged for, because overall it's a way of living life, like I always say, and there's nothing to be ashamed about. I have people asking me questions, even till now. People ask me like, why do I wear the bindi every day? Why do I keep my hair tied? Why do I always light the lamps? How come I don't, for instance, like, how come I don't get a haircut on Friday or something like that? And I know the information to explain my points. So for the parents and the kids, you need to do your own research and make sure you're always involved in what you're doing. And other than that, yeah, it's pretty good.
Okay. Devansh?
Yeah, tall order, because all of my fellow panelists have pretty much said everything. Now, to summarize all
Well,
of
let
it,
me break it up for you.
my
Actually,
first message.
sorry to
Yeah,
interrupt you. I want to
yeah.
address you from two perspectives.
Mhm.
You have a unique perspective, because I want you to address people who are watching from India, Indian parents first, and then parents in the US.
Yeah. My message actually would be quite similar to both of them, and it would be that, and this doesn't apply to you, Nikunj Bhaiya, or my parents, or like the like kind of parents all of us have had, but to a lot of Hindu parents, and it is that, dear uncles and aunties, please start being good Hindus yourselves first before expecting your children to be like that. If you don't impart good Hindu values, Hindu knowledge, and awareness about all issues concerning us from a young age, then what will happen is, don't be surprised if your child ends up being brainwashed by all these anti-Hindu forces. So it's a very blunt reality that they need to face. Now I know that my country is a developing country. Academics are something that's very crucial in all of our households. Our parents are pretty, fixated on us getting good marks, because that's the honestly the only way you can improve your, standards of living here in India. But I think it's also like true for the US, because we are moving towards the knowledge economy. So it's but you need to maintain a balance, because you cannot go on and create bookworms. You need aware citizens. You need people who can talk, who can argue, and who can assert themselves, frankly. So being good at the workspace or in your educational institution is not enough. You need to develop a comprehensive personality, like so Swami Vivekanand has said. One of my role models whose poster I find right behind you, Nikunj Bhaiya. So that's what came to my mind, that we have to uh, develop a holistic personality, particularly. And also a side note is focus on our kids physical fitness. That's something that I find very lacking in most of my fellow Hindu parents, that they're not focusing on their kids fitnesses. They're just saying that go study, study, study. But why aren't you sending your kids to the gym or even to play a sport? So that's because with fitness, with a fit body, you get more confidence. And that's something that I realized, like I experienced myself, that as I started going to the gym and running and playing a sport here and there, I realized that I found myself being more confident about my Hindu issues, which is something totally unrelated. But there's a comprehensive rethink that Hindu parents need to do on how to raise their kids so that the kids can be good Hindus, and not just good Hindus, but proud and assertive. Yeah.
Excellently put. I think proud and assertive Hindus, that are physically and mentally fit. And as Swami Vivekananda himself said, that we need the fitness of the mind and the body in order for us to do that. Our dharma has the tools, right? We look at every single deity that we have: Krishna, Shiva, Rama, Hanuman, Devi. Every one of them is physically fit. There is no Devi or Devata that is not physically fit. And we talk about their valor, we talk about their strength, right? We talk about their compassion, but we also talk about how brave they are. Ramayana, Mahabharata, they create Kshatriyas. We are talking about warriors, and yet we cannot produce those physically and mentally. That's why our tradition gets challenged, and we're not able to challenge back, because the war of narrative will continue. The war between adharma and dharma will continue. The war of information and disinformation and misinformation will continue. Where do we stand as young Hindus, as parents, as community members? Which side of the Kurukshetra do we want to be on, right? This is a time where Sri Krishna is calling us to be that Arjuna, not put your weapons down and cry, but be that Arjuna to fight that Sorry, I keep getting cut off. My apologies. So on that note, I think it's saying that time is up for us. I wanted to thank everybody for this wonderful panel, for sharing your thoughts, for your advice to parents and youth who are facing this psychological persecution, psychological manipulation, to stand strong, stand in solidarity, become a safe space. All of you are part of that safe space. I encourage everybody to send their kids to Hindu Students Council, parents and adults to join KONA. We are forming a task force on CAA to address the misinformation out there. So if you would like, please volunteer at kohna.org. That's kohna.org. Resources on CAA you will find there at kohna.org/CAA, kohna.org/CAA. I want to thank the panelists today. Wonderful conversation, and looking forward to working with all of you. Namaste.